Good morning, and welcome to the Landmarks Preservation Commission's public meeting and public hearing for April 14th, 2026. We're going to begin by taking attendance, and I'm going to ask our Deputy Legal Counsel, John Weiss, to call the roll.
Vice Chair Master,
Here.
Commissioner Chen, Commissioner Chu,
Here.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Ekwembe, Commissioner Jefferson,
Here.
Commissioner Mayen,
Here.
Commissioner Wilder.
This meeting is being held in our hearing room at 253 Broadway on the second floor. It is also being held via Zoom and live streamed on YouTube for anyone who would like to participate remotely. We're going to begin with a public meeting agenda for items which have already had a public hearing, then move to a public hearing agenda for new applications on our designated properties. Now I'd like to turn it over to our Director of Preservation, Corey Harala.
Thank you, Vice Chair Master, and good morning, everyone. Start today's Preservation Department agenda with public meeting item number 1, LPC 26-07016, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 531, Lot 17, 52, and 56, 375 Lafayette Street in the NoHo Historic District Extension. This site is currently a parking lot, and the application is to construct 2 new buildings. This was last presented at the public hearing of March 10, 2026. No action was taken at that time. Public testimony was taken at that day, but the applicants have not yet responded to that. We did break after lengthy testimony, so we'll pick up where we left off there, and the commissioners will discuss the project after the applicants respond and recap the presentation. So we'll begin after we open the proceedings.
Okay, let me also just note that Commissioner Mahan is recused from this item, but let's go ahead and open the proceedings. Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that?
No second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the proceedings are open. You may begin.
Morning, Commissioners. Erin Ruley, Higgins, Quays, Barth, and Partners. It's been a bit since we were here before you, but we appreciate this opportunity to respond to the testimony we heard at the hearing, and we look forward to your discussion later today. I would begin by saying that we view this project through a fundamentally different lens than those that opposed it. We start with what the possibility is for this site rather than its limitations. The question is not whether you can realize the city's housing goals for the site, but how does one do it? Our answer to that question is evidenced in the proposed design. You mass the building to be within the height of the district's historic buildings. You create a unique site-specific massing that reflects variations in the streetscape from the specific history of the district, and use that street wall to relieve the massing, anchor the corner, and mediate the block context. You employ the material palette found throughout the district and use it in a creative and frankly contemporary way, and execute this by the masterful hand of a world-class architect. This is a positive in Denver, one of opportunity for a contemporary new building to stimulate the context and provide continuity in the streetscape for a long underutilized site. So we heard a lot of testimony when we were last here, and so for structure, we're going to address it under 3 main themes: scale and context of the buildings, 2 building design concept, and the large building facade treatment. So to begin with scale and context, I'll walk us through this section, and then Chris Cooper of SOM will walk us through the more design-specific elements of the response. So we heard a great deal of testimony that suggested that the context for the new building should be, and its scale relationships should be limited to Great Jones Street and the NoHo Historic District extension exclusively. We obviously disagree with this assertion. Here we see on the map the original NoHo Historic District is the white area to the west and to the north, and the red area is the extension, and our site is highlighted in red. The 2008 district is an extension of the original historic district to protect an area that was left out from the earlier boundaries. The extension shares the same history, phases of development, and evolution as the original district. When the NoHo district was designated, you can see in the map the district extended up Lafayette Street on the west side and then cut over to include the east side of Lafayette Street, directly north of our site at 381 Lafayette Street. So this is the Rauschenberg Foundation building. Immediately to our north is included in the original designation, and as is the entirety of the west side or east side of Lafayette Street in the original district, just north of us. The only part of the historic Lafayette Place that was left out of the original district was our site, ostensibly because it was a parking lot, and the very tip of Lafayette Place just below Astor. When the district was extended in 2008, the site was included in the extension, and this is really makes good practical sense. You wouldn't designate the extension and leave a hole in the middle. It was still undeveloped parking lot site. And by contrast, you can see that the all of the sort of fringe site boundary sites along Bowery were left out. So vacant sites or underdeveloped or sites that had non-contributing resources were left out of that edge boundary. But of course, you wouldn't leave a hole in the middle. But 375 is the location of 375 in the extension is really a practical matter because it's historically linked to Lafayette Place and the original district. And it would be incorrect to analyze the context for this site and its potential development as being limited by the context of 56 buildings that were designated as part of the extension itself. The testimony suggested that the proposed building scale is out of context based on proximity or lack thereof to other large buildings in the historic district. As you can see in this view, tall buildings are in the surrounding physical context. The proposed project is not an outlier to where large buildings are located in the historic district. The new building would be seen in the immediate physical context of the Silk Building, directly across Lafayette Street and 770 Broadway at the head of Lafayette Street or Lafayette Place historically, two of the tallest buildings in the district. These are not far-flung buildings. The district is relatively compact, and this differs from other historic districts. The blocks are short, and all of these buildings would be seen in conjunction with 375 itself. Beyond general proximity, we also heard that large buildings are located on Broadway as a wide major thoroughfare of a vastly different scale. The site is actually located at the intersection of two wide streets. So we've mapped the wide streets versus narrow streets on this map. Green indicates wide streets and blue is narrow streets. This is according to zoning and how zoning is allowed for wide streets versus narrow streets. But this is not simply a question of the zoning allowances. It is a question of the historic evolution of the site and Great Jones Street itself. So as you can see, Broadway and Lafayette are both wide streets. Great Jones Street is wide, and all of the other east-west streets are considered narrow. As we established in the original presentation, Lafayette Street from the north side of Great Jones is 100 feet wide, and this is 20 feet wider than Broadway, which is 80 feet wide, and then Great Jones is 74 feet wide, and it is the widest of the east-west streets between Houston and Astor Place. And so you can see with the street pattern highlighted, you can see the distribution of the large buildings. This is based on area. So these are buildings of 60,000 square feet or more, and their location along Lafayette Place. Further, we looked at this in terms of building height. So again, mapping those same wide streets in green, and then we've shaded out the area to the south. This is the area which, when in the original presentation, we spoke to the history of Lafayette Street and the cut through, the historic Lafayette Place, and these blocks to the south were continuous blocks that were then Lafayette Street was then extended through that block and changed sort of the very sort of nature of those continuous blocks from Broadway to Bowery, but those were finer scale cross streets without the intersection that currently exists within the blocks today. So you can see on this plan the distribution of tall buildings. This is everything over 100 feet. And we also inserted into this the historic buildings that were previously on the site, two of which were over 100 feet. And you can see that both historically, tall buildings were located along this sort of wide thoroughfare or boulevard of Lafayette Place. And these were buildings of architectural distinction and significant scale. It was the sort of fundamental history and development of this place itself, and remains a place, an opportunity for larger scale development on the site. So then just moving to the existing context, in our original presentation, we shared the history and development of both the site and the district as a whole, and specifically the three phases of development that introduced variations in scale, material, and building type. And we see all of that context in this streetscape, which is so typical of the NoHo district, the great variation of period, scale, and character, and the juxtapositions that resulted from those phases of development. We also see a new layer of contemporary construction that shows the modern interpretation of the historic models and the connections they make between the historic buildings in the streetscape. We believe our proposal fits comfortably within this context. We also heard in testimony that because of the extent of the site, that this should be treated as a Great Jones Street building as much as a Lafayette Street building. And with this, we agree. I think this view is particularly helpful because it gives us a sense of the south side of Great Jones Street, the character of the buildings. And the block front is predominated by 6- and 7-story loft buildings. And the new building scale, the proposed new building scale, responds directly to this street wall. And the height of the proposed street wall along Great Jones is consistent with what we're seeing in the block front along Great Jones. And I think while much of the testimony attempted to limit the context to the block itself, the commission has consistently looked to the entirety of a district as the basis for findings of appropriateness. There's a long history of approvals of new buildings with findings that describe variations in height and massing of the historic buildings found in the historic district, patterns of development where taller buildings faced on corners sites and stepped down to the lower rise side streets, and the technique of using street wall versus setback massing as an appropriate way to mitigate height and relate to the historic buildings. And I think I would close by saying that context and appropriateness cannot be reduced to one street or building or a percentage or an average. Particularly in a context of a historic district as diverse as NoHo. Context is about interpreting a place and its complex history and determining how best to engage with that history moving forward. This is what makes the work of the commission so important, considering the history and the evolving landscape of the historic district and applying your expertise and in turn shaping the city around us. And it's not a formula, it's ideas and expertise and the way we think about the city around us. So with that, I'm going to pass the presentation to Chris Cooper to walk you through responses to the design criticisms.
Thank you, Erin. Good morning. Chris Cooper, SOM. As Erin has pointed out, we're proposing a 2-building development. And we're doing so as actually quite simply a practical response to a policy issue. And the ambition, whether one building or two, is consistent, and that is to achieve the maximum housing benefit on a single empty site. The real driver of the massing for this project is the zoning, the underlying zoning. And so the height of the building and the area of the building is defined by that underlying zoning. And so regardless of one building or two, the volume, the bulk of the building remains the same. So the maximum zoning height is set at 195 feet. And I think that Aaron has and we have very clearly demonstrated that this height and even this width is not an outlier within the district. The street wall, the other mechanism that zoning applies, is set at 125 feet. And we can build under that height of 125 feet, but we can also exceed that height of 125 feet for a certain percentage of the street wall. And so we're using that vertical adjustment. That's our mechanism. It's our primary mechanism, I should say, really for trying to stitch respectfully into the immediate and adjacent context of our block. So we are manipulating that street wall, and we're mimicking the historic patterns of stepped heights seen within the district. So as within a single building, this is a new typology. And that's a new typology that we see as being reflective of the larger patterns in the district, the patterns that recall a stepped relationship of one building to another. And the stepped approach is what allows us to position height where we see it best suited, the corner. And it allows us to better acknowledge the lower heights of our immediate adjacent neighbors. So the facade expression pulls from the district context, and it reinforces modularity. It reinforces the modularity of our shared street. And that allows us to, we think, respond to the length of the facade on Great Jones, but it also allows us to respond to the grain, the existing grain of the neighborhood. And we've implemented that stepping again on the short facade of Lafayette. And this is, again, placing height at the corner of Great Jones and Lafayette, but it allows us very directly to step down and respond to our very unique and direct neighbor to the north. So our project is a single owner constructing housing on a single empty lot and doing so all in one phase. The district has a history of uniform development of multiple buildings with a single expression. We're embracing the idea of a uniform expression for a single development project and are stitching that into our block in a stepping figure reflective of the historic context. The proposed facade expression. We see this as being directly related to the historic patterns of development in the district. Contributing, big building facades often have a very consistent approach to facade treatment across their broad facades. Uniformity and repetition are hallmarks. It's seen again and again, and it's seen in the north of the district, the south of the district, the western edge, and even the center of the district. And if we look at a few of those very directly, starting with NYU Tisch School of the Arts, this is a 16-foot wide repetitive bay, 12 bays that expands for the full width of 200 feet. The 770 Broadway, similarly, 22-foot bays, 15 of which expand to make the full width of 335 feet. And the Silk Building, our most direct and immediate neighbor, the block immediately to our west. Here, there are 18-foot repetitive bays, 15 of which expanding to full width of 275 feet. And that brings us to 375 Lafayette. Our proposal, we're borrowing the 25-foot module, which is consistent with the immediate block structure to our east and also to our south. And we're proposing 9 bays along the long facade, totaling 227 feet. We believe that we've endeavored to design a modular facade expression that's rich in detail. And it's rich in detail using historic materials, but using those in contemporary methods and to produce and achieve advanced performance. With that, we conclude our comments, and we very much look forward to hearing your response and your questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Commissioner Ginsburg?
When you refer to regulations requiring 2 buildings, I presume you're talking about 485X? Right. I have a number of questions. You mentioned the dormer rule. It looks like you use the 60% dormer rule, not the 40% dormer rule. Right.
That is actually for both.
Is that what you did? Okay, thank you. And it also looks like you designed this as 1 building and said, oh, with 485X, we need to make it 2 buildings. Is that what happened?
I would say that there was a decision to buy building, 2 buildings, put it into a specific category of wages, one that was still deemed fair and appropriate. And that put the onus on us as the architects to decide if this should be expressed as 2 buildings or expressed as 1. And we made the decision. We are putting forward the proposal that it should be expressed as 1 because it is 1 owner, 1 site being built as 1. And we tried to avoid the idea of what we feared would be a pastiche expression of maybe different materials or different architectures, even though it's operating and performing as a single building on a single site. So that was our decision.
Also, one other question. Almost all, but not quite, of the tall buildings on the plans you show are along Broadway. Is that correct? There was at least 1 on Lafayette, and then up at the north there may be a second. But
so maybe if I even go back to that diagram, I think that we believe emphatically that it's not limited to Broadway, and it's particularly, so these are the tall buildings. And so as we note, obviously 770 to the far north, but as we continue down Lafayette as a wide street, that also historically and consistently housed tall buildings, including the Silt building, which is directly to our west, and our site itself as the corner, the bottom anchor of Lafayette Place, historically had a very tall building.
thank you.
Commissioners, do we have any other questions? Commissioner Jefferson?
Could you go back to page 13? I think your diagram of the facade. So this one. So your strategy is stepping, and you also turn the corner and you step again. Why that decision? Because the corner building is always a bookend in urban situation. Why did you decide to step it down again?
Right. I think that's a decision again that we made. We put the height at the corner, and we established that this was, first we established we thought it was a good mechanism to do the stepping, to tie in on Great Jones. And with that being our formal language, we made a decision that we thought it was also appropriate, to answer your question, on Lafayette because it's part of the same building. And that device allows us to put a more respectful relationship to the Rauschenberg Foundation directly to our north. So it was based on our immediate neighbors more than the broader context or a broader ideology.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions? Okay. I'm going to note that we did have some testimony and letters that were submitted, and they were shared with the commissioners in advance of today's meeting. So what should we do? Go ahead and start the discussion. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and start the discussion. Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start this discussion?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Very interesting project with a lot of interesting components to it. And I will preface my comments by saying a few things. First of all, I think that the site is appropriate for a large-scale housing development. I think that many of the devices and elements chosen, much of the analysis was accurate and appropriate. However, I think that the core argument about scale and context is novel in the context of the commission as I understand its last 15 or so years. It is true that we look at context more broadly than the immediate neighbors. But by the applicant's argument, if one were to look at, let's say, the Upper West Side Historic District, and one were to have an assembled lot in the center of a brownstone block, and one wanted to put a 25-story double tower apartment building in the middle of the block, you could make the argument that that was appropriate because elsewhere in the district, maybe down the block on Central Park West or on Riverside Drive, there were tall buildings. That is not how context works in the way we use it, in my experience. We look at the immediate surroundings within the district, not necessarily the immediate neighbors, but the general tenor of the district as a texture. And all of the diagrams they show are crystal clear that the higher elements form an L with Broadway running north-south and I guess it's West 4th Street, wherever the 770 building is on the north end. That's a high band of buildings. And as Aaron pointed out, Great Jones itself is a transition from high to low. And if you look at the new buildings that have been built along Great Jones, north and south sides, none of them approach this scale. They all used context in the traditional manner to look at the general surroundings of the immediate area within the district and make a judgment about context. To consistently and solely refer to these perimeter buildings that are basically in a different part of the district with a totally different context is, I think, not based in our patterns of usage of the term context. Now, the Silk Building is an outlier. The Silk Building is a tall building. And I think that you could make the argument that, all right, that's pretty close. That's across the street, even though it's a little bit to the north. So maybe you could do that. And I think that's an argument you could hang your hat on. But that building's 150 feet tall. Their building's 200 feet tall, 195. So I don't think that you could make the leap from 150 to 195 for sure. So I think that, if you're going to look at massing in a contextual way, it has to be done in the way that the commission has applied that term to countless other projects over the years. And that is to look at the immediate context, the surroundings, and the portion of the district in which the building sits. So there was an argument made at the last meeting that the reason that this site could accept an extraordinarily tall building relative to relatively short buildings is that was historically the relationship that was on this site, right? There was an even shorter building to the north and and a relatively taller building to the south before it was demolished and made into a gas station. And when I asked Erin whether that would justify any size juxtaposition, she said yes, if it was nicely designed. That too is a novel approach that I don't think is supported by the way that this commission handles context. Just because a juxtaposition per se exists doesn't mean that juxtapositions are in and of themselves at any scale and perspective appropriate. So I just don't think that the basis for a 195-foot tall building on this corner has been made. And I don't see the reasons for accepting the way that the commission has traditionally, consistently treated the word context here. So that's number one. Number two, I think, is the stepping. The stepping strategy is used here to try to make contextual gestures on a facade basis to the neighbors, as you can see from the image that's up on the screen now. And the applicant called this a new typology in the district. It is a new typology in the district. I don't think it's an appropriate one. I think a reading of this district is very clear. I mean, this is a district of big, dumb boxes. These were industrial buildings. They were built simply. They were built prior to the zoning for the most part. And they were, there's not a single building that I've seen here that is historic anyway, that has the kind of architectural gesturing that stepping represents. 30 Rock is a different story. One Wall Street is a different story. There's a whole history in New York City of stepped architecture that's very distinctive. And it's like when you wear a bow tie, everyone knows what it means. It means that you're trying to dress up. And you can't say that, I just happened to take my scarf and put it in this fashion and it's a new thing. It has visual associations. And when you do a building that has strong visual associations with a whole different architectural language, you can't just put that aside. This building looks like it's in the wrong place to me. I mean, it looks like it belongs in a district that has much more Art Deco or post zoning resolution architecture. I don't I think that it's a misread of the district to kind of try to bring into it this language that doesn't, it's trying to do a contextual thing. It's trying to relate low buildings to high buildings and gesture to the surrounding heights. But I think it misreads the nature of a district where such subtleties are not present. This district's about putting a big box next to a little box. And those boxes are neoclassical or other styles that are very symmetrical, very solid, very stolid, very compact and discreet. So I think that's a misread. I think that once you accept the idea of the setback and the stepping, however, I think that the distinction between the layer that is set back and the layer that is frontal is not significant enough. I think that in order for that to work, the setback layer has to be a lot lighter and kind of more delicate than the layer that's in the front. They make some gestures in that direction, but I don't think it goes far enough to kind of make that inset part feel less present and less massive on the street. Not that I think you need to do that in the first place. So I think for me, this building needs to have a new look. Stop there.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
So I'll start with the scale. I find the scale, the height of the building appropriate. I find 3 or 4 blocks up, they're large buildings. And I think in that context, that visual context of walking down the street, it would be appropriate over time. In terms of the stepping, stepping on the long axis, that, page 13, I think, if you could put 13 on. This one. When you look at it in perspective, walking down the street, walking across the street, it really doesn't matter. I mean, it really, there's obviously other architectural languages you could do to work with this block, but stepping is an approach. And at first I thought, gee, it's kind of just simple-minded. But then I thought it didn't matter. And I'll get to that later. But when you turn the corner, go back to 14, I guess, the next one. This one, I thought they missed a really important issue about the corner, the bookends of blocks, which we find urban planning in New York City extremely important. If you look at across the street, there's a bookend, stops the movement. So they should go 1, 2, 3 bays and make it just a rectangle, just a typical rectangle next to the smaller building. And that would be enough. That would make this urban corner read well. The issue that I have, though, the main issue, is the materiality, the terracotta. I've worked in red terracotta before. Red terracotta is a dominant material. I mean, this size building, all in terracotta, I mean, you wouldn't see anything else. It didn't matter. It'd just be one huge terracotta building, nicely detailed, nicely done, but too much terracotta. And I wish they would break it up a little bit. I mean, my fellow commissioner said, the back building should be a different tone. Perhaps that would help. Perhaps the setbacks, you could, instead of just having it stepping, set back a little, change the collage perhaps a little bit, change the texture. But this amount of terracotta, it's not a material that sits quietly. It's a material that somewhat shouts. And those are my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu?
Yeah, thanks. Very interesting project. I really appreciate a lot of the precedents and diagrams and site maps to show us neighboring building volumes and heights within the context. I tend to feel that this building is, as stated, sort of on the border there in terms of massing. And when I look at the proposal, my immediate reaction is that it could be appropriate, but I'm having issues with the way that the massing is expressed. When I look at the streets and I see Lafayette, I tend to feel like that is the facade, the main street facade that could accept a bigger feeling of mass, which this elevation is shown. I do think that the stepping here in some ways detracts from the ultimate statement. When I look at these views also, I try to look at them in 3D. The northern elevation, I think, needs to work better with this elevation here, the west elevation. As I turn the building from south, west, east, and north, I think that there seems to be a simple massing story here, but it doesn't seem to complete itself when I turn the building, and I find that to be very two-dimensional. In terms of the material, the way it's expressed, I don't mind the terracotta. I think it's a beautiful way to express the building that has contextual relationship. I think that the decision to articulate the facade in these 25-foot bays has rationale. And I will speak to this. When I look at Great Jones and this stretch in particular, the block and lots, the lots on the block are oriented north-south. And so a lot of the houses are narrower on this facade on both sides of the street. When you look at the nearest large-scale building, which I do think is a good precedent, the Silk Building a block away, that street has the building lot running the other direction, which give it a sense of appropriateness based on the block. When I look at this street here, Great Jones, I feel like when the discussion of two buildings is brought up, I keep wanting to see two buildings. In fact, I understand the logic and the design strategy for doing an sort of a fabric wall that is stepping and to give it that compactness. But I think to some extent, that design strategy a bit fights itself when you're trying to articulate these 25-foot bays. When I walk down Great Jones, I feel like at the end, because of the height of the steps, which are quite above the height of the context buildings, I don't perceive it so much. And I see a wall of texture, which I think can be appropriate, but in this specific block, because of the divisions of the lots, I feel that this piece feels out of scale in that immediate context. When I look at this elevation, I can see that. The building has the makings and the design ability to create some more secondary massing articulation, which I think it's almost there, but it's kind of neither here nor there. I think it lacks a little bit of a sense of its identity because it's trying to make a move to be contextual, but in some ways it feels a bit of an anomaly because of that. Again, I would really like to see an approach to the massing that does address the scale on Great Jones. And to me, what I'm saying right now is it's more about a division in the east-west direction in a sense of scale as I'm walking east-west. The base, I want to just talk a little bit about the base. I really do like the precedent in terms of scale and elevations. When you look at the historic buildings that are of a larger mass, I can't help but sense that because of the height, the bases in those precedences, as well as even the buildings here on the right side of Great Jones, have a sense of a higher street level presence, which to me help also a sense of the streetscape and break down a sense of a repetitive facade above it. I also have said before that I feel like it's a little bit compressed down there and it feels like it needs more air and visibility down at the street level in terms of transparency of facade. The east facade is the lot line facade, and speak to the east and the north. I wish that the north facade had some of the clarity that the south does in its massing. I feel that the north facade, because again of the height, is very, very visible, as well as the east all around from all sides. If it's is going to be a slightly taller building in this portion of the neighborhood, I think it should celebrate its facade more. And the east and north feel like they're falling a bit shy of being a proud statement of this building. It's too big to not just announce its presence. And I feel like if that is the goal, it should really address all 360 sides. I think that covers my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilder?
Yes, first I want to thank the applicant for the presentation, for the additional information that wasn't presented in the first or previous presentation. I think the information about the context in the neighborhood is helpful. It's good to understand that there are taller buildings within a few blocks of the existing building to at least try to justify the decision for the height and massing of the building. And even taking those things into consideration, I think going back to Commissioner Goldblum's point, it's really hard to look at that as the context that we're actually seeing. Even in this image here, we don't really get a sense of those other structures. We kind of get a sense of what's outlined. and then also knowing Great Jones and the other side of the street and the rest of the buildings in this district, I don't know if the context that was presented necessarily relates to what we're looking at. Another thing, I think the outline of the street wall and the other buildings, I think it's misleading. And part of it is, if I'm at Great Jones, although this street wall is what I'll see, I'll still feel the building that is, or the portion of the building that is set back above this outline. So I don't really look at the outline as doing something that the applicant wants it to do. I do think that I appreciate the story that it's trying to tell and the gesture that's trying to be made, but I don't think it's effective in what's happening. I don't know what height this building should be, but I do think there are some things that hurts this design, and we're talking about the stepping of the street wall. And when you compare it to the stepping that we see contextually, that stepping is a little different because it's happening with several buildings, with different facade treatments and different materials and separations. And this one, I think, is trying to relate to that, but the consistent terracotta material and articulation, it doesn't break it up. And if no one ever mentioned to me, if no one ever said that this was two buildings, I probably wouldn't think about that. But I think it probably would help if there was some sort of separation, that if you wanted to continue with this stepping approach, I think would be helpful if there were different materials, something that broke it up, where it actually felt like the rest of the context in terms of building stepping up versus the actual building material and size stepping. I'm kind of on the fence with the articulation of the facade. I do think that it is nice, but I think Commissioner Jefferson did make a good point, where I think you may kind of get lost in the material and not necessarily see all of the things that is happening, especially from a distance. And I think that may not be helping the design. I also agree that on Lafayette Street, that I think the stepping definitely should not happen there. I think it's drawing too much attention and not necessarily serving the purpose that is intended. I think it actually just hurts it, and it just doesn't fit with the rest of the neighborhood. Yeah, no, those, for the most part, those are my points.
Thank you. I'm actually gonna speak as well. So in terms of the massing and the height of the building, I actually buy the applicant's argument that we can look at the broader NoHo Historic District. I would look at 770 Broadway and Tisch as examples that would justify something of this scale and height. However, when I look at 770 Broadway and the Tisch building, it is a very large building, but when I look at the design of those buildings, it doesn't look overwhelming to me. And perhaps that's because of the material and the design, perhaps it's because the base is very large and distinctive. When I look at those buildings and then I look at this building, even with the stepping, this building does look overwhelming. And I think that the stepping, even though you meant it to kind of relate to the neighboring buildings, I don't think that it's that successful. And I'm not sure if it's because of the terracotta color, the fenestration, which is very regularized, or because the base is not as distinctive. But in terms of the design, this building does seem overwhelming and massive for the context. So, I don't know what the solution is, whether it's to go and make it more distinctive in terms of two different buildings, or to change the material, or to articulate the design more. But I think some of the other commissioners had other suggestions. So I would say I could be convinced that the height and the massing is could be appropriate here, but this building doesn't seem to deliver that for me. And I'll turn it over to Commissioner Ginsburg.
And we're having a variety of opinions. I'm going to try to some degree, unify them. I won't totally. And I think it was a thoughtful presentation. I appreciate that. The thing that my fellow commissioners haven't said is the stepping is how you maximize the zoning. And so you have an issue here, because I don't think the mass itself is the problem, with potentially one exception. But you have an issue here that if you don't use the dormer rule, you go up to a height, you go back and you go up, and you've lost usable floor area. I think part of the other thing I want to note here is along Great Jones, this is by far the longest facade. And so I think the answer, I know you wanted to design it as one building, but if you start designing it as two buildings with the break at the building, which is at the bottom step, all of a sudden the building isn't going to step as much. If it's a different material, color, that I'm not talking about. Then the second issue is the setback part, as Commissioner Goldblum said, has much less variation. And I think making that look different between the two buildings would help. And the one place I may question the mass is that wall at the east end, because it's a big drop down to the lower buildings there, and trying to do something, you might be able to do it with materiality on the facade. Then the other thing I want to, the Lafayette Street is harder because I almost prefer it wouldn't step, but I realize the zoning sort of forces you to step. But you could look at that. The north facade needs work, because that north facade is going to be, it isn't like I'm doing a back facade and in 5 years somebody's going to build a taller building next to me and no one will see it. The Liechtenstein building is not going anywhere. So you're always going to see that facade. And that facade looks to me now as an afterthought and fairly massive. So I think there are ways, again, potentially with materiality and differentiating between the two buildings. What's interesting, it's massive, but it's also busy because there are pieces, and I think it needs some work. So I basically can accept the massing if you start to deal with the stepping by trying to treat it as two buildings, because then it won't look as much like stepping. When it's all the same material, it looks like you're stepping.
Thank you. So we're going to take no action, and have you think about the comments from the commissioners, and we'll bring you back in the near future. Thanks. Let's move to the next item.
Right, the next item is public meeting item number 2, LPC 26-00925. This is an application for a binding report in the Borough of Manhattan. It consists of multiple intersections and it pertains to the street plan of New Amsterdam and Colonial New York, individual landmark. This is a pattern of streets, the only remaining above-ground physical evidence of the Dutch colonial presence in Manhattan. The application is to establish a master plan governing the future construction of curb extensions into the street bed. This was last presented at the public meeting of March 24th, 2026. No action was taken at that time. I'll note that there was no quorum at that meeting, not enough commissioners to vote. However, there was discussion and a consensus of support at that time. So we'll turn it to the applicant after we open the proceedings.
Okay, let's open the proceedings. Commissioner Mahan, would you make a motion to open the proceedings? Thank you. Commissioner Wilder, would you second that?
A second.
Thanks. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the proceedings are open. You may begin.
Thank you, Commissioners. How's everybody doing today? I'll keep this brief since I know a number of you have seen this presentation, so I'm going to run through it super fast. Happy to answer any questions again, but want to make the best use of our time here. As was mentioned, we're here really looking at a prototypical approach for how we can make improvements in the individual landmark that is the street plan of New Amsterdam and Colonial New York. We're looking for a sort of a prototypical approach, but we also are here with the Department of Design and Construction because there are 5 locations where we're actually going to be doing construction and have design. Those are the 5 boxes that you see on the screen. These are the locations. Again, our overall goal here is to come up with a prototypical approach because there are a number of changes that are happening in Lower Manhattan all the time. We have a changing set of mobility needs that have happened over the years. Again, we've had a number of curb extensions that we put in paint. This is really a way to make sure that we can continue to make these curb extensions to address safety needs, changing mobility needs in Lower Manhattan while still respecting the individual landmark that was established by the Commission. We are doing this work primarily driven by ADA work. We need to make sure all of the locations here are compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act, can accommodate people with wheelchairs, strollers, so on and so forth. And that's really what's driving those 5 locations where we're making pedestrian ramp upgrades. And in doing so, we're looking to build the curb out and then incorporate the ramp. This is a precedent from Broad Street that we covered that just shows how this has been done in the district already, where you can see an area where the existing curb is maintained, that image on the left, and then the area has been built out into the street at the same level as the sidewalk in the same material. And then you actually have a new curb in the street that then drops down to grade. And so this is really the prototypical approach. As you can see here, we'll have the new curb is shown in this dark black line. The existing curb will remain in place at grade. So it'll be a flush header essentially to demarcate where that curb is. Then we'll build out the new curb extension, install the pedestrian ramps, so on and so forth. And the same kind of approach happens at the mid block. The rest of the here's the details of it, and then the rest of the presentation is just going through the specific locations that will be constructed in the near future. So happy to run through those real quick. We've got the first location is Broadway and Rector Street. You can see the sort of overall location. Here's the painted space that'll be built out. The plan on the right. Second location is Hanover and Pearl. This is actually right by our offices at DOT. We have the painted curb extension here that will be built out. Third location is Broadway and Beaver. Same thing as idea. Bridge and Whitehall. And then the final one is Broadway and Wall. I know I went through that very fast. Again, I'm happy to address any questions, but I do know we talked about this back on the 24th, so wanted to be respectful of your all's time.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioner Jefferson and then Commissioner Chu.
So in terms of history and all that stuff, it's great. In terms of studies, when you do your computer modeling, how does it affect traffic? Does it make it more traffic, less traffic? What's the net result of this type of?
So for these particular 5 locations, all of the curb extensions are essentially taking areas that didn't occupy any moving lane. There was no traffic. There was no parked cars. There's no impact in that case. It's really just extending that curb to take advantage of what is essentially the end of the parking lane,
Uh-huh.
give people a shorter distance to cross, so on and so forth. In areas in the district where we've made more substantial changes, there is a full traffic model that's done. We analyze that based on vehicular counts and pedestrian counts that are taken to make sure that any changes that we are making don't have a negative impact, or it is something that we, can manage or mitigate.
So what's the impact? Not in this particular case, but in your larger study.
In the larger case, in most cases, again, it very much depends on what it is that we're trying to do.
Uh-huh.
But, there may be some additional delay to vehicles waiting at a light, right? That gets into level of service. This is very traffic jargony, I apologize.
Uh-huh.
But in most cases, we can then analyze where trips are diverted, right? So if we take a space away from a moving lane, those cars go someplace else, right? And the model shows that they'll go to this street, that street, the other street, and what impact that has on those in terms of either slowing people down, or in some cases, it has no impact because of other factors, right? Congestion pricing is a good example, right? That's changed the dynamic in terms of how vehicles are moving through Manhattan, south of 60th Street. It's taken, you can quote the MTA numbers, right? Millions of vehicles off the streets. So that changes also what capacity there is. But
Just one more question.
Yeah, sure.
Since I'm interested in the city, where would I go to see the results of these studies?
So any true full analysis is actually documented through the seeker process, the City Environmental Quality Review. There's an entire website that you can go to look at the seeker analysis. This is true of most developments, right? And there's typically a transportation chapter.
Yes.
Our DOT website has a number of these studies as well. If we're ever going to present on a particular change, again, it's project by project, but that's usually where that ends up. And those are probably the two main sources, but I'm sure there are others out there as well. Of course.
Yeah, I just had a question about, I think it all looks good, but the bike lanes are always such a mess. So if there's a bike lane that goes there, that means they essentially they pinch.
Yeah, so in there is one example here where we have the bike lane on
Yeah.
Broadway. So in this instance, the curb extension is taking
Right.
up that painted space, and then the bike lane goes essentially around it, right?
Oh.
So we're not changing the bike lane. That will stay at grade. That'll still be painted. It's really no different than any of
Got it.
the sort of typical
Okay.
protected bike lanes that you step off. If you think of First Ave, Second Avenue, right? You wait on the curb. There's a protected bike lane. Sometimes there's a refuge island that you
Right.
can then cross to. So that'll all generally remain the same.
It's sort of taking up that street parking space, essentially pushing towards the
Correct.
lane. All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and in this case, it's basically sort of leftover space on Broadway
Right.
after we made other changes many years ago.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Wilder?
Yeah, quick question. There are no precedents for this work in the city?
We have lots of precedents for curb extensions. We don't have any where there's an individual landmark street grid. This is the only individually landmarked street grid. So we do this work in historic districts. We've certainly taken those kinds of things to the commission before.
Yeah.
We presented on our PedRamp program more broadly, and we've used these kinds of curb extensions in some cases to try to preserve existing historic material at the curb, right? Where we can build out a curb extension, keep the historic material, but then get the pedestrian ramp in. So we have those kinds of things. We don't, in most cases, keep that back curb line. That's really a result of this.
That's
the
what I
unique
wanted to
qualities
know
of
if we
this.
saw, if we were able to see something like that.
Yeah.
My last question, not fully related, but your project timeline has fiscal year. Is that saying the work is happening that year, or is it going to take that long to complete the work?
The idea is that that's the fiscal year where the project would start construction, and then it'll take X amount of months to actually finish.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions? Okay. So I'm just going to note that there was no testimony submitted on this item after we heard it. So the last time, I think there was a general consensus of support. We just didn't have enough commissioner to get to have the 6 votes. I'm also going to note that Commissioner Ginsburg is recused from this item. So let's go ahead and start this discussion. Commissioner Mahan, would you like to start this?
Be happy to. Yeah, I recall discussing this in some detail with the other commissioners that were here a few weeks ago. So I won't rehash all of my comments, but in general, I think it's a quite prudent and straightforward and careful application. I think the extensions make obvious safety and traffic sense, and the retention of the granite curb and the historic location is an appropriate way to recall and maintain the landmarked street grid while adapting to contemporary issues as discussed. That's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum? Commissioner Jefferson?
Appropriate.
Commissioner Chu?
Appropriate, and I think that these types of interventions help essentially the pedestrian experience improve and take over a little from the vehicular sense here.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilder?
I think it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. So, John, will you call the vote? Or do we? Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Commissioner Mahan, would you read the motion?
In the matter of LPC 26-00925, multiple intersections, street plan of New Amsterdam and Colonial New York, an individual landmark. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed bulb outs into the street beds will allow for the installation of New York City Department of Transportation ADA-compliant pedestrian ramps, that the establishment of a master plan will ensure a consistent street treatment of the installations over time, that the line of the historic street beds will be marked with granite header blocks at the existing curb line to reinforce the historic character of the individual landmark, that all curbs at the bulb outs will be granite in keeping with other curbs found throughout the landmark, that the concrete sidewalk at the bulb outs will be tinted gray to match the surrounding standard sidewalks, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special character of the individual landmark site.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that?
Second.
Thank you. John, will you call the vote?
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Mahan,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder. 6 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
That's been approved. Thank you. Let's move to the next item.
All right, we'll also be moving to our public hearing agenda, starting with public hearing item number 1, LPC 26-08000, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 1072, lot 65, 17 Montgomery Place in the Park Slope Historic District. This is a Romanesque revival style row house designed by CPH Gilbert and built in 1887 to 88. And the application is to construct a rear yard addition.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ryan Seek, Preservation Staff. The proposal before you this morning is to construct a two-story rear bay addition at 17 Montgomery Place. Here we see the current conditions at the rear facade and a rendering of what's proposed. Now, I do want to note that this is being brought before you this morning instead of being handled at the staff level because our rules do not allow for staff to approve an application for an occupiable rear yard addition when there's any visibility. And here is the visibility. There's a view corridor through a break in the street wall to the north on Carroll Street. There's that same angle when there is tree coverage and during winter. Now, in terms of historic context, we see in these historic fire insurance maps that rear additions have been common features at houses of this block. In the lower left-hand corner, this map dates from shortly after construction of the row. So we see 17 Montgomery in the middle of the three at the bottom, and there are three-sided bays depicted at the other buildings. For current context, here's the current aerial view of the block. And as we see in this block plan, that the proposed two-story rear bay addition is in keeping with the depth and the height of rear additions found at a majority of the row houses at this block. And for our immediate context, here we see the rear additions and bays at the two houses to either side at 11 and 19. And across on the other side of the block. as well as eastward into the block, the rear additions. On this rendering, we see the proposed materials and finishes, including black fiber cement board cladding, windows, and a sheet metal cornice. The elevation shows the area of removal and proposed addition. And then we see in plan the proposed footprint with a maximum width of about 13 feet, 2 inches, and a projection of 5 feet, 11 from the facade. This rear bay was mocked up. Here we see the area of the rear bay that would be visible through the break in the street wall. This view is from the north side of Carroll Street. And then on the south side, here's the view as you would be seeing it through the fencing. In this section, we see the proposed addition in relation to the rest of the building's massing. Here is an AI-assisted rendering of the proposed work. And we are joined today by the architect, Anat Sudri, who can answer any questions you may have about the project.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions right now. Yeah. Let's go ahead and see if we have anybody in the room who would like to speak on this item. Noting that there isn't, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth Lee to see if we have any remote testimony.
Those joining via Zoom who wish to speak, please use the raise hand function. You'll be promoted to panelist, after which we ask you to unmute, state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. The first speaker will be the Historic Districts Council.
Hello, this is Emma Bartley speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC just wishes to commend this proposal. The rear yard addition is modest in scale and thoughtfully designed, introducing minimal additional bulk while enhancing the building in a restrained and sensitive manner. This proposal serves as a strong example of how rear yard additions can be executed with care and restraint in historic districts. Thank you.
Anyone else who wishes to speak, please use the raise hand function. Seeing none, I'll note for the record that Brooklyn Community Ward 6 recommends approval.
Thank you. It looks like the testimony was supportive. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, if not, let's go ahead and close the hearing. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Mahan, would you second that?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed. Commissioner Wilder, would you like to start this discussion?
Sure. Thank you to the applicant for the presentation. I think it's pretty straightforward. I understand why it came before us. I think being the view with the mock-up as well as the other images where we were able to see where the extension would be located. I think it's minimal impact for the rear facade and what's actually visible with trees and all of those things. I don't think it really hurts the historic character, so I can find it appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg?
I agree, appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Mahan?
Appropriate.
Commissioner Goldblum?
Agreed.
Commissioner Jefferson? And Commissioner Chu?
Right.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilder, would you like to read the motion?
In the matter of LPC -26-08-000 17 Montgomery Place, Park Slope Historic District, a Romanesque revival style row house designed by CPH Gilbert and built in 1887, 1888. Application is to construct a rear yard addition. I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Park Slope District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features that Only a small portion of the proposed bay window addition will be visible from a public thoroughfare at an oblique angle through a gap in the street wall on Carroll Street. That other buildings in the row and within the block have historic bay windows of a similar size and design. That the modest projection of the two-story bay window will not diminish the block's central green space. That the design and materiality of the bay window featuring black finished fiber cement board cladding, wood trim, sheet metal cornice, and double hung windows will be in keeping with the residential scale and character of the building and the row, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building or the Park Slope Historic District.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that?
Second.
Thank you. And John, will you call the vote?
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Mayen,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder. 7 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
That's been approved. Thank you. Let's move to the next item.
All right, we'll actually move to the next two items. They are separate applications, but will be presented together. First is public hearing item number 2, LPC 26-05650. An application for the binding report in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 73, Lot 10, 89 South Street in the South Street Seaport Historic District, a modern pier and retail structure designed by Shop Architects and built in 2018. This application is to enlarge the ground floor retail structure. And also public hearing item number 3, LPC 26-08510. Also an application for a binding report at the same property. This application is to install signage and window treatments.
Good morning. I'm Marcy Gray, Vice President and Executive Producer of a company called Meow Wolf. We're future tenants at Seaport Pier 17. With me are 2 members of our internal facility design team, Anna and Brittany, as well as our architect of record, Mancini Duffy, represented by Jessica, and our landlord, George. I wanted to tell you a little bit about Meow Wolf to set some context for the items we're bringing before you today. In 2008, Meow Wolf began as a collective of artists whose work was anchored in a passion for creativity and immersive storytelling. They began installing artwork in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and then around the United States. In 2016, we partnered with George R.R. Martin, author of Game of Thrones, to open our first permanent exhibit in Santa Fe called House of Eternal Return. Since then, we have opened exhibits in Las Vegas, Denver, Houston, Dallas, and are opening in Los Angeles later this year. We have experience going into buildings, existing buildings, historic buildings, and constructing our own buildings from the ground up. Our work is complex and deeply immersive. We use a wide variety of code-compliant materials to create the effects that we intend and require a high level of control in the environments that we operate in. And this informs how we utilize technology, lighting, sound, and media to help shape the space in a way to best tell our stories. I wanted to show you some examples so that you have an understanding of the work that we do to set context for this conversation. Jessica, would you please come up to bring forward our items for the board?
Hello, I'm Jessica Sheridan. I'm a principal at Mancini Duffy. The way I'm going to present this proposal, there are 2 dockets. One is related to the scope of work for the landlord, the Seaport Entertainment Group, and one is for the tenant. So the first part of the presentation is about the landlord scope, and then assuming that that gets approved, I'll be talking about the tenant work. The areas in question at Pier 17, there is an expansion of the first floor on the ground floor, and then window treatments on the 3rd and the 4th floor. The expansion on the ground floor will be within that orange rectangle behind that facade. And this is what it will look like. The idea is to expand the ground floor within the existing building. So we're aligning on the north and the south facades of the existing volume. On the west side, we're aligning with the volume just above that to the north. The reason why we're expanding this is really to aid in the queuing for the groups that we're planning on attending the exhibitions. Because the exhibitions are on the 3rd and the 4th floor, we feel that we really need some additional space so people aren't clogging up the public way. The elevator lobby on the right is within the existing volume, and then on the left is showing the entry vestibule ticketing and some lockers. The elevations on the top is the existing elevation, and on the bottom is the proposed elevation. So you can see the expansion of the ground floor, and then the additional window treatment that we are providing in that volume. There is in the master plan a requirement for the extent of glazing, which we comply with. One item of discussion is related to the view corridors that were proposed in the master plan. One is looking north is to the right on this plan. So those view corridors are to the piers of the Brooklyn Bridge. One corridor is on the west side looking down an atrium space. And then the other one is further to the east looking toward the eastern pier of the Brooklyn Bridge. Our volume does not block either of these view corridors. So the renderings on the top are the day view, and the bottom are the night views. On the left are the existing conditions, and on the right show the proposed expansion. So you can see that the west facade aligns with the adjacent west facade, and that the south facade is an extension of the existing ground floor. We're also proposing some in-paver lighting that I'll have a detail of in a little bit. So then the tenant scope is, I'll start with the signage on the ground floor. On the upper elevation, that's showing what we're proposing as the landlord, and then on the bottom is the tenant. It's an enlarged rendering of that. On the left, showing what we want to do with the landlord, and on the right, the tenant. There are existing signage requirements as part of the master plan that we are deviating a little bit from. The rest of the building, the signage is embedded within the entry doors. So our entry doors are on that west side, those double doors that are facing the atrium space. We would like to propose to put the Meow Wolf sign on the corner of the building. It's going to be an extruded aluminum sign with an inset acrylic panel that we will be illuminated from within. And then on the bottom in the center there is the detail of the uplighting around the perimeter as well. Again, you can see the day and the night view. So when we get to the 3rd and the 4th floor, Marcy presented the exhibition space, which is represented in yellow on these plans. Because of the immersive experience that one has when they visit these spaces, we need to create a light lock, and we really want to create that immersive environment where you are removed from the existing space. There are also corridors along the south facade that you can see highlighted on the 3rd and the 4th floor. Those spaces are intended to be a transition from the immersive environment as you make your way back into reality, basically. We were looking at precedents around the neighborhood, and we felt that the tin building really speaks to what we want to do in that exhibition space. There are a couple of conditions within the tin building where there are walls behind the windows that block your view to kitchen equipment and other things that were happening behind the space in the tin building. And that's similar to what we're proposing for Meow Wolf. So in elevation on the lower side, you can see where there's somewhat of a pattern. That's where the corridor spaces are. And then the 8 windows on the right show the full block of windows. And then on the east facade, it turns the corner and also covers the curtain wall that's recessed. So in the corridor space, we are transitioning from that immersive space into, back to reality. The idea is that we're creating an experience that's within the exhibition, but also is grounding you in reality. So we have this acrylic screen that this is from a mock-up, where as you're walking through the corridor, you would have views to the south and you would see outside of the window. The detail has a scrim behind that, a blackout shade behind that. And at night, the idea is that the stained glass effect will be backlit from within. And then we have two other conditions around the exhibitions. So section B shows a wall that is constructed behind the windows, similar to the tin building. It's about 8 inches in from the facade. And then at the curtain wall, it's in further from the facade. It's a little bit more than 2 feet in. So that's condition C. In walking around the existing space, the mock-up is shown. You could probably see it best in the lower right image. During the day, you don't have too much of a view of it, and we're hoping that that will be acceptable for you. And then at night, we did a mock-up, and the upper left image shows it kind of in the middle. Can I point with it? Oh yeah. That's the mock-up right here. So this is why we're proposing a blackout shade, which is rendered here. The idea is that at night, we understand that the building is focused on the illumination of the facade, not displaying what's within. So we want to create these darkened effects within the facade in order to feature and highlight the lighting display that happens on the facade. From the East River, you can see the full elevation, and then at night, that full effect. But then the images on the bottom are walking around the public way, and you can see that the windows themselves are pretty reflective and dark, and we don't think that the inset walls will have any impact on the facade when it's during the day. So that's all that I have to show for you. When we get into the Q&A, I'll pull up the elevations just to have something for reference.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Commissioner Chu and then Commissioner Wilder.
Can you explain which windows on this elevation are being proposed?
So the corridor.
All those grays. Okay.
And then the walls would go in these 8.
So the walls are sheetrock back partition, and that face is a dark color, is it?
Yeah, we will work with staff on the best color. We were thinking that it would be a light color, like a white or something.
White. Is that going to be lit from the outside?
No, we didn't want to disrupt the lighting on the facade.
Okay.
The facade is illuminated, so we felt that if we lit at night, it would take away from that.
Yeah, that's something that can be worked out. Typically, when you're doing a back painted condition, you tend towards a darker gray color, not a light color, because it emulates it as if there was what you really would see in a clear window. It's usually dark behind. When you do a light color, it will blast forward, which will be the opposite of the effect.
We have no problem going with a darker color.
Okay. And then on the other facade, the end facing the river. Okay. So that entire mid portion is grayed out. What happens there?
Yeah. So the lighter gray on the top elevation here, those are spandrel panels.
Okay.
And then this darker line here is the floor between the 3rd and the 4th floor.
Okay.
So the darker gray area is where we would be insetting another wall, and that's inset about 2 foot 2 inches from the curtain wall.
So that's a total opaque condition.
Correct.
And what's there now behind that glass?
Right now, it's just clear.
Open.
It's open. There's
To the interior space. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Wilder.
Yeah, is the work on the interior, is it expected to be permanent? And would it require the work at the windows to be permanent as well, or is that changing at some point?
the walls would be permanent. And then the scrim will be largely permanent, but because it is a scrim, they may change it.
Thank you. Can we go back to the last slide? So we have the 4 at the end that have like a sheetrock wall, and then the other ones have like a blackout kind of shade. And do we have a color for that? Like, is it gonna try and match the sheetrock? Or?
Black, The idea is that during the day, the blackout shade will be up, so the
Uh-huh.
light can penetrate through that stained glass effect.
Mm-hmm.
And then at night, the blackout shade will be a blackout shade, and then the lighting in between shade and the scrim will backlight inside of the space, so you don't see it outside.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? Okay, noting that there's nobody in the room to speak on this item, let me turn it over to Stephen Thompson to see if we have any remote testimony.
Those joining via Zoom who wish to speak, please raise your hand, after which you'll be promoted to panelist. I saw one raised hand that's now gone down for Christina Conroy. Please raise your hand if you wish to speak. Right. Seeing none, I'll note for the record that for the first part of the application, Manhattan Community Ward 1 recommends the applicant work within the footprint of the existing pier building and remove or reduce the scale of the proposed new building to access the exhibition space. And regarding the interior application, Manhattan Community Ward 1 recommends that any proposed decorative graphics on the walls of the ground floor entry be removed and the stained glass proposed on the upper floors be oriented entirely inward.
Thank you. Does the applicant want to respond to those comments?
When we met with the community board, there was a slightly different design. We had different window profiles and we had a lot more graphics on the south facade that we've now reduced and only kept within the west. So once you get inside. And then the addition of the blackout shade, just for clarity's sake, within the stained glass, that was addressed.
Thank you. Commissioners, any final questions? Okay, let's go ahead and close the hearing. Commissioner Chu, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilder, would you second that?
Second.
Thanks. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed. Commissioner Mahan, would you like to start this discussion?
Sure. Yeah, I think this is a pretty clever proposal. Understand that this building is bound by a binding report, but of course it's a contemporary building. It has a certain sort of entertainment-focused character. I find the addition for the entrance to be appropriate given the sort of alignments that it creates with the existing building. It respects view corridors that were identified to be signage on the little building is loud, but modestly scaled. I can find it appropriate. And I think the approach to the window treatments and the dichotomy between the way that they are treated in the daytime versus nighttime, demonstrated sort of a level of understanding that was, fairly sophisticated about what the building wants to convey and how, one actually sees through windows what they look like and how that's different during the day and night, which not everyone always, sort of fully thinks through. I think the color of the sheetrock wall facing outward, needs to be worked through. White's probably not the right color. That can be worked through with the commission. So I can find this appropriate. With the staff, pardon me.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second, or would you like to? Would you like to?
I agree with Commissioner Mahan, and the one thing is to work with staff on the color of the chipboard behind the windows, but to make it work as best as possible.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilder?
Yeah, I think it's a unique project. I think it's a well presented. So overall, I can find it appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu?
Yeah, I agree with my fellow commissioners. I'd like the applicant to work with staff on the selection of the colors and to make sure that it doesn't draw undue attention to themselves in the day or night. I think that can get worked out. Ultimately, all of this stuff is reversible. Sheetrock wall's reversible, so I'm not super concerned about this in a permanent condition. It is a contemporary building. My only comment, and it's just a thought here, is that the signage is very powerful and it's on a diagonal, which I think is appropriate for the approach. I just wish that the addition was a little more dynamic. It feels like the side facing the public realm was very solid. You have a corner. The glazing, I thought, for the entry door feels very mousy, and it could have maybe wrapped and been more inviting to the corner. But other than that, I think it's an appropriate application, and I look forward to checking out the immersive experience here.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
I think it's all appropriate. I think the signage, it's kind of interesting design process and color. I think it's appropriate.
Thank you. And Commissioner Goldblum? Thank you. Commissioner Mahan, would you like to read the motion?
It's two of them, yeah, so read and vote. Read and vote.
Take a vote and then do the second one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you want, I could read the second one, just to give you a break. Thanks.
Either way. Okay. In the matter of LPC 26-05650, 89 South Street Seaport Historic District. A modern pier and retail structure designed by Shop Architects and built in 2018. Application is to enlarge the ground floor retail structure. I recommend approval, finding that the enlargement of the ground floor retail enclosure will only block minimal views of the south tower of the Brooklyn Bridge from the furthest point of visibility through the enclosed portion of the view corridor, and will not alter the more prominent view of the north tower. That the enlarged ground floor retail enclosure will not overwhelm or detract from the overall pier structure in terms of its placement, form, or size, is entirely within the footprint of the existing building and will relate well to the form and massing of the existing ground floor enclosure. That the cladding will match the permitted facade cladding materials and fall within the percentage of glazing allowed by the existing building-wide master plan and will harmonize with the balance of the pier building's facade at the ground floor and mezzanine storefronts of the north and south facades, and that the proposed modifications will not detract from the special historic and architectural character of the South Street Seaport Historic District.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. And John, will you call the vote?
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Mahan,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder. 7 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
Okay, that part has been approved. Let's go to the second one, which, okay, perfect. Oh, good. Go ahead.
Easy here. All right. LPC 26-08510, 89 South Street Seaport Historic District. A modern pier and retail structure designed by Shop Architects and built in 2018. Application is to install signage and window treatments. I recommend approval, finding that the installation of a projecting internally illuminated metal and acrylic sign at the corner of the ground floor commercial enclosure will not detract from or overwhelm the modern pier building or surrounding open spaces. That the internal blocking of windows from daylight and other exterior light sources at the 3rd and 4th floors will support the use of the interior space as an immersive art exhibition space while being reversible. That the acrylic screen window treatments and partitions will be set back slightly from the existing windows, thereby maintaining a level of depth and transparency into the building. And that due to the location of the pier building projecting into the East River, there will be limited close-up vantage points of the window treatments and partitions from within the historic district, and they will be barely perceptible from longer views, and that the applicant will work with staff to carefully evaluate and select the finish of the exterior facing portion of the window partitions and their impact on views of the exterior of the pier building.
Thank you. And Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that?
Second.
Thank you. And John, will you call the vote?
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Mahan,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder. 6 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
That's been approved. Please continue to work with staff. Thank you. Let's move to the next item.
Right. Next item is public hearing item number 4, LPC 26-08398, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 210, lots 1 and 34, 31 to 33 Lispenard Street, aka 321 to 323 Church Street, and 35 Lispenard Street in the Tribeca East Historic District. These are two commercial buildings designed by Mac L. Reiser and built in 1946 to 47 and 1954 to 56. And the application is to demolish the existing buildings and construct a new building.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Valerie Campbell, a partner at HSF Kramer. We're land use counsel to the applicant. So this application requests a certificate of appropriateness to demolish two existing buildings, one at 3133 Lispenard Street and one at 35 Lispenard Street, and to construct a new building on the combined lot. The development site is located at the intersection of Leonard and Church Streets at the edge of the Tribeca East Historic District and is just south of the Soho Cast Iron District. Here is a roof plan of the proposed new building. The eastern 25 feet of the lot is 35 Lispenard Street. The development site is zoned C62A, which is an R8A equivalent in the Tribeca Mixed Use District. Residential FAR is 5, and there's a 145-foot height limit. The building zoning lot incorporates 325 Church Street, which is lot 2, and that lot contributes about 961 square feet of floor area to the new development. The building is as of right with respect to zoning. So the existing one-story brick commercial buildings at 31 through 33 Lispenard and 35 Lispenard Street were constructed in the mid-20th century. Neither building is given a style in the designation report. So here is an existing view looking east on Lispenard, taken west from Church Street. Here's a view of the existing buildings looking northwest from Lispenard. A view looking south from Church Street, South Street. Some of the commissioners here may remember in 2019, the commission approved the demolition of 3133 Lispenard Street and the construction of a new building. And that building is shown on this site, these slides. What you see in the right-hand panel is the little one-story building. That's 35 Lispenard, which is now in this proposal is proposed to be demolished and become part of the new building. So that building was never built. The development site was sold, and so this is a new proposal. And I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Fatih Ergan from Marius Architects, who will present the design of the new building.
Hi, my name is Fatih Ergan from Marin Architects, representing Marin Architects. So the idea of this building was to create a modern interpretation of the historic buildings in the neighborhood. We wanted to become contextually sensitive yet contemporary in our design ideas, and we draw a lot of inspiration from the historical context and historical buildings. So we're proposing 8-story mixed-use building, retail on the ground floor and residential on top. The building follows a typical historic tripartite building structure: base, body, and crown. Base is quite distinct from the residential above, but before we get into that, I wanted to show you the previous applicant. It used to be 7-story building. Our proposed application is 8-story building, but we're sitting on a bigger lot. So the base, we start with a strong bulkhead, about 18 inches high, a graphite bulkhead, tall arch windows, and a lot of transparent a ground floor gives us the grandiose look that we're looking into what we look from a traditional retail building. The body of the building is rather tranquil, and it consists of repetitive windows and column grid. They come together in harmony and rhythm. So through articulation, we have achieved a strong shadow lines and building character. They are similar to historic cast iron buildings of the neighborhood. And go up, get another angle from the ground floor. Are overlooking the Church Street. Before we go into the next slide, I want to talk about a little bit of canopy. The canopy wants to be, so the idea of our design was to have a sculptural look. And this is like one of the contextual quirkiness of the neighborhood. We wanted to come up with the sculptural look of the canopy. Rather than a simple add-on feature to the building, we wanted to have its own character. And our elevation, there's a slight slope on the street. You can see that retail and residential entrance are slightly different elevation. Then elevation from Church Street side. Elevation from the north side of the building. We have a solid wall that we're adding some articulation because it's going to be visible throughout the many years to come. Building section. On the 7th floor, we do have a setback on both Lispenard and Church Street, and then follows by the setback floor and bulkhead. These are the street elevation, old versus proposed. A lot of street height variation around the block. Again, the Church Street side. Proposed. Walker Street is still under construction, but we wanted to show that. Cross Street, Lispenard. Solid void diagrams of the Lispenard Street. New. Solid void for Church Street side. Elevations. North and south. These are the shots that we created from down on Lispenard and down Church. So the top floor is the bulkhead. We wanted to hide as much as possible and not draw a lot of attention when you look at a street. We want to create a strong shadow lines, and that kind of draws your attention from the bulky parapet wall, and that's carefully set back. And we created this artificial setback on the parapet line as well. The view, looking at that solid wall where we create some brick articulation, and we have some window openings. Shot down from Lispenard, Broadway. Actually, it's from at the corner of Broadway and it shows you the top, and the reason why we put this is that our staircase enclosure will not be visible from a street level as you're standing from the corner. Shots from further down Lispenard and Church Street. This is our crown design. So we draw a lot of inspiration from the neighboring building, and we wanted to end our building with a strong cornice detail, and then kind of carry the language that we have it on the ground floor into upper level and then continue that arch design. Then obviously the set-back floor and the parapet. As you can see, the parapet wall is further set in. So instead of creating a maybe 5-6 feet of long parapet, we created that shadow line horizontally on the building. Shot from Canal Street, looking our street. Our tall arch windows on the ground floor. Some of our material palette, we're thinking of obviously metal cladded facade with double pane glass and graphite wall base, and on the north side of the building, we're thinking of a thin brick system, the masonry system that we wanted to utilize in this building. And then we have some our canopy and our signage are polished stainless steel, brushed stainless steel materials. Some of the signage examples that we will be using in our building, we're planning to use acrylic-based, backlit stainless steel signage. And then you can see at the bottom right, you can see some of our rendering of the lighting that we plan to use it on building exterior. They're very limited. Only future showcase our building design. And enlarged canopy detail. Water will be collected from down in the middle, and as I said, it's a sculptural piece that we designed for this. Some of the approved buildings around the neighborhood, they're very close to us. We draw some inspiration and some precedent from these buildings. Again, some of the color examples that we used it. 93 Reed heaviest one that we inspiration from, and then the other color samples around the block. Some canopy examples that are within our neighborhood, and addresses closest being 100 Franklin. Wanted to have that curtainess in our thank you. And then following, sorry.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Commissioner Chu?
Did you have a rendering of a night view? I saw your lighting design scheme. It showed just lighting up on the first 2 floors, or?
We don't have it. We only study for the lighting.
Right.
I know it's a little dark here.
Yeah.
But so we don't have it.
It's only on the bottom 2 floors,
The bottom
though.
2 floors, yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Goldblum?
Why thin brick?
Why thin brick?
Yeah.
Because we didn't have enough wall thickness. So we wanted to bring some of the masonry characters of the neighborhood. That's why we proposed.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Commissioner Mahan?
What material is the canopy made out of?
Canopy made out of brushed stainless steel.
That'll be formed somehow. It'll be
It's going to be formed, custom made form. Yes.
curving in both directions.
No, I think it's a mistake on our end. Oh, do we want to? Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. It's a mirror finish. Sorry.
Okay. What material is the facade?
Facade is a metal facade.
It's painted
Yeah,
aluminum?
Yes.
Mhm.
It's a powder coated aluminum.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Is there anybody in this room who would like to speak on this item? Noting that there isn't, let me turn it over to Stephen Thompson to see if we have any remote testimony.
I see one remote testifier, Christina Conroy, will be promoting you to panelist, after which we ask you to unmute yourself and say your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Christina Conroy for the Victorian Society, New York. Now, the Victorian Society supports many aspects of this proposal. The two modest commercial buildings on the site are not significant. Their loss will not destroy any important historic material or diminish the overall character of the district. The proposed building is well scaled for the combination lot. It maintains the street wall and relates well to the adjacent buildings on both Lispenard and Church Streets in terms of color palette and the overall texture of the street facade. Finally, we're pleased to see that the design approved in 2019 is not going forward, but we question the use of metal cladding in a district where masonry is the predominant historic facade material. A new building in any historic district should be considered not just on its own merits, but for the way it relates to the streetscape. Now, this proposal seems to have strayed into the neighborhood from the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. So we urge the applicant and the commission to rethink this design, this aspect of the design. Finally, we note that some commissioners and the public have raised questions about the way historic district boundaries have been drawn to exclude key sites. Here's an example where the commission was absolutely correct in including this obvious corner development site so that it could positively influence future development. We urge each of the commissioners to take an active role in making sure that the boundaries of new historic districts are logically drawn. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you. Seeing no further participants on Zoom, I'll note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 1 recommends approval. I also note that we're receiving some comments that we're having an issue with closed captioning that we're working on fixing.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to respond to any of the comments?
We understand the concern about metal panel. So our aim is to make this building be there for the many years to come, and we're planning to build a quality building. So we're not planning to use cheap aluminum facade. We have conversations ongoing with multiple manufacturers. We're trying to identify the most ideal thickness for us, but we're landing somewhere 3mm aluminum sheet panel. That's the plan at the moment. I just want to thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? If not, let's go ahead and close the hearing. Commissioner Mahan, would you make a motion to close the hearing? Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg, would you second that? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed. Commissioner Chu, would you like to start this discussion?
Sure. So the site and the existing two structures there, I feel that those are modest existing buildings that don't contribute to the district. I think it's appropriate for their demolition here. The proposed building here, I think, in terms of its massing, color, and texture, I think it's quite appropriate. I feel like it sits well in this neighborhood. Definitely the scale and the massing, I think, is a nice. It's a little taller. It commands the corner without being overscaled. It's within the family of the historic structures around, and clearly a contemporary example of relevant proportion scale to the existing bays of the historic buildings. I'm not bothered by the metal cladding aspect here. There are other cast irons sprinkled through this area, so I don't find it an anomaly in any way. And the only comment I would have had is, I think the color is appropriate and I quite like it, but the precedent used appeared to have, some of those cast irons have a little blue in them, and I'm just wondering if that's the desire or not, but I can approve what's being proposed in the rendered views here.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilder?
Yeah, I agree. I think the building does fit on the block. I think it is appropriate to demolish the existing buildings that are there. Yeah, I I think it's a nice design. I find it appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Ginsburg?
I agree with my fellow commissioners, and I would just add, I like the canopy as something, you know, as someone who's lived in Tribeca for 36 years, we may have lost some of the artistic side, but having something that's a little different out there is really nice. And it also is really nicely done.
Thank you. Commissioner Mahan?
Yeah, I agree with everyone. You know, I wanted to add that I appreciate there's a real commitment to quality in the design proposal as well. You know, there's real depth in the articulation that you can see in the details. The applicant discussed, you know, finding the right thickness of metal panel to ensure that it's, you know, flat and has longevity. I agree that I think the massing, the proportions, expression are entirely appropriate. I like the little sloping spandrel canopies or eyebrows that they create, and I think the canopy is great. I can't wait to see how that is fabricated. That's going to require a commitment to quality. I do wonder if the penthouse should be made more distinct so as to differentiate itself from the primary cornice a bit. That could be with color or with reducing the cornice of the penthouse itself. That's something that I think the applicant can work with the staff on, certainly.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
Well, I'm really disappointed that they didn't go for an 8-story reconstruction of the diner that was there. I mean, that would have been like a real. But all right. I mean, I think it's also I totally agree with what everyone said. It's totally appropriate. But I think it is interesting to note how well contemporary architects seem to do here at the commission with cast iron modern versions. It's very interesting, you know, that whereas, you know, we might tussle more over a terracotta building perhaps or a brick building, there seems to be a kind of a formula for contemporary architects to do historically inspired cast iron-esque buildings in historic districts that we pretty much go along with not a whole lot of pushback. And this is an example of that. I think it is an interesting kind of Venn diagram overlap of the two eras, perhaps, and one that what's his name, the guy who started all the cast iron stuff. I forget. I'm spacing out, isn't it? Bogardus. Bogardus would really get a kick out of. I do think that Frank's comment about the cornice on the penthouse is a good. And I do wish they could re-explore the idea of thin brick on the sidewall. It's such a cheapo material, and I worry that at 8 stories, if freeze thaw has its way and those things start to pop off, it would not be not an aesthetic comment. It's more about durability and, you know, quality materials.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
Well, I agree with all the comments of the fellow commissioners. There's only two things that I have is how delightful the canopy is. And second, the crown. I think the if from the corner view, if the plane wasn't sticking out, if you had the cornice be on one side, the long facade, but not on the short facade, it would work better for me. Or if you had it just a rectangular form, but I would prefer to have the cornice be on one side, and on this view just be flat. Work with staff and see if that would work out.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu, would you like to read the motion, including the comments about, working with staff on refining the details of the penthouse and the cornice, and then exploring possibly the brick?
Yeah, and I'm just going to make one minor comment now too, and it's something for the applicant to look into, is when I look at the facade from a street level, sort of in perspective, I like the sense of texture. Just be careful that you're achieving the depth. When I look at the top floor and the large windows as they go up to a more pronounced forehead, we don't want that to look too flat. And I think that as you look at your details, make sure that your texture and your depth of facade is feeling good. That's my only comment. I think that with the views I'm seeing, the applicant understands what that means, and I think it makes a big difference to have that sense of layering and depth and not too flat. Okay, I can read this. And I'm going to make a comment also about the top. Okay. In the case of LPC 2608398, 3130 and 33 Lispenard Street, also known as 321, 323 Church Street, and 35 Lispenard Street, Tribeca East Historic District, two commercial buildings designed by Mac Reiser and built in 1946 to 47 and 54 to 56. Application is to demolish the existing buildings and construct a new building. I note that the one-story buildings at 31 and 35 Lispenard Street are not ones for which the historic district is designated. I further note that the streetscapes of both Church and Lispenard are comprised primarily of 4 to 6-story cast iron and masonry store and loft buildings with some notable variation in height and proportions. I recommend approval, finding that the demolition of the existing non-contributing buildings will not detract from the special historic and architectural character of the historic district, that the presence of the proposed 7-story building immediately adjacent to the 4 and 5-story neighboring buildings will be consistent with this portion of Church and Lispenard within the historic district, which includes similar juxtapositions of buildings of different heights. That the design of the new building featuring articulated cast iron inspired elements will be consistent with the evolution of this historic district, which includes some cast iron buildings dispersed among masonry buildings from various periods. That the prominent aspects of the design, including the rectilinear grid pattern featuring vertically oriented openings between piers and horizontal bands similar in scale to cast iron framing elements, will recall aspects of historic cast iron buildings, thereby helping the building to harmonize with other buildings in the streetscape. That the use of profiled metal cladding will recall in a contemporary way the historic use of cast iron to reflect earlier building materials while also helping to maintain the building's identity as a modern construction. That the pattern details and proportions of the fenestration pattern, which is regularized on the Church Street facade and graduated on the Lispenard Street facade, will be consistent with the windows at buildings of this size throughout the historic district. That the height of the building base will recall the taller bases historically found at buildings of this size within the historic district and will relate to the base height of neighboring buildings within the streetscape. That the composition of the ground floor components, including piers, display windows, bulkheads, and entrance doors, will be compatible with the commercial character of the bases of buildings throughout the historic district. That the organic form of the stainless steel marquee is well scaled to the entrance and serves as a counterpoint to the rectilinear lines and dark color of the facade, resulting in a contrasting yet harmonious composition. That the one-story penthouse will be set back from the primary facades, maintaining a consistent street wall. We ask that the applicant study the overhang of the penthouse above to not confuse it with the profile of the cornice of the main building below and to distinguish that element slightly. So they can work with staff on that. That the design and finish of the bulkheads consisting of plain gray finished metal cladding will blend with finishes of surrounding buildings within a complex roofscape. That the simpler design of the north side facade with the appearance of masonry and punch openings will recall the exposed secondary facades of the building found in this historic district. Please note that commissioners have noted that there's a preference for full white brick as opposed to soap brick on that north facade. And if the applicant can look at that with staff, please. that the presence of visible penthouse and bulkheads is consistent with the industrial character of the buildings in the historic district, which historically featured a variety of utilitarian rooftop accretions, often visible from a distance.
Thank you. And Commissioner Walder, would you second that?
Second.
Thank you. And John, will you call the vote?
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Mayen,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder. 7 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
That's been approved with modifications. Please continue to work with staff. Thank you. Let's move to the next item.
And I do want to note a schedule update. The lunch break was inadvertently left off the printed schedule, the last schedule, though there was time allotted for it. That being said, we are pretty far ahead of schedule, so we're going to pull an item to do before lunch, and that is item number 5, LPC 26-07990, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1127, Lot 23. 15 West 74th Street in the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. This is a Queen Anne neo-Grec style row house designed by Daniel Burgess and built in 1889 to 90. And the application is to modify masonry openings and replace doors and windows at the front facade.
Good morning, Commissioners. Richard Larry, Preservation Staff. As we've jumped ahead of the schedule, the architect is on his way. He's hopefully will get here shortly. In the meantime, I'll just present the scope of work so we can have a look at. So what we can see for 15 West 74th Street, there was an early alteration prior to the designation of the district, which is the removal of the stoop. So the scope of the current proposal is twofold. One is to widen and alter the brownstone tinted stucco masonry at the main entrance on the left, and then to make an alteration to one of the basement windows at a very deep sunken areaway to convert that into a door. This is just some floor plans showing the widening of the main entrance on the top, and then to provide a secondary means of egress and service entrance for the southernmost, the bottommost entrance you see here. The alterations to the main entrance are primarily to widen and increase the height of the opening. They will be matching the design of the historic parlor floor doors that we can see in the tax photographs. And the alterations above the door are based on the pre-designation alterations made at one of the adjacent properties in the row. Just some details of the photographs here, showing number 11 West 74th Street, of which they're basing some of the designs off of. And the window at the basement, they will be salvaging and then reinstalling the historic window grills to the door, and then also adding a metal panel so that the sort of configuration sort of recalls the historic opening. It's a good sort of a 3 feet deep sunken areaway, and plus with the railings at the areaway fence and for the historic grills, a lot of the details, you'll be seeing that door through those. And then just to show you the details of the historic parlor floor door and what they're proposing, here they are. And just say that they will be matching the design, configuration, and material and finish. And just a detail of the proposed window to door conversion. And again, it will sit the same plane as the historic windows. Okay, and if there are any questions, the architects are here to answer them. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Commissioner Ginsburg?
I have two questions. Is part of this work converting this multifamily building into a single-family residence? Or I'm just understanding the program that's happening.
Yes, my name is Tom Winter. I'm the applicant of record. Yes, we're converting a multifamily back to a single family to its historic previous use.
And the other thing, in the elevation, it looks like there's a rooftop addition. Is that being done at staff level?
Yes, that's correct. That was resolved at staff level.
Thank you.
Commissioners, do we have any other questions? Okay, noting that there isn't anybody in the room to testify on this item, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen Thompson to see if we have any remote testimony.
Those joining via Zoom who wish to speak, please raise your hand. Our first speaker will be Megan Fitzpatrick.
Hello, Commissioners. Megan Fitzpatrick speaking on behalf of Landmark West. Our Certificate of Appropriateness Committee finds the proposed widening of the main entrance door to be appropriate, as it reflects the historic doorway's proportions, design, and materials. However, we find the introduction of a second entrance to be inappropriate. The alteration results in an awkward composition, and the removal of the existing sill detracts from the building's historic character. It is also redundant, as there is an interior door that is soon to be even more accessible via the aforementioned widened entrance. Thank you.
John Graham.
Good morning, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society in New York. We find the proposed changes to this 19th century row house to be mostly appropriate. The proposed new door matches the historic example, and we appreciate the glazing and brick mold details. The stucco detailing is also appropriate for a 19th century neo-Gregg style house. Our concerns include the proposed new wall sconce above the main entrance door. The proposed sconce is very minimalist and modern, in contrast to the historically informed stucco work and door designs. We suggest a more period-appropriate sconce design would call less attention to itself. One like the existing sconce currently next to the main door or above the door at number 11 would be more fitting. We also think the new visible secondary door on the facade should be wood with traditional details. An aluminum door is not appropriate on a brownstone row house. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Seeing no other participants on Zoom, I'll note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 7 recommends approval. LPC also received a letter from Historic Districts Council suggesting the framing of the main entry be further articulated and that the framing of the new service door be adjusted to match the window with which it's paired. LPC also received written testimony from one individual recommending denial.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to respond to some of the comments?
Just had one comment in regards to the aluminum door. It's not an aluminum door, it's a wood door that is aluminum clad for durability. And that matches all the other windows, which are also aluminum clad, which basically traces the historic profile, but provides more weather durability. So it's a wood door, which is aluminum clad.
I actually have a question as well. What is the need for the second door on the ground floor, given that you're expanding the main door?
Yeah, so we're adding an egress door. So the secondary stair in the back of the building, and that provides a secondary means of egress, and it also improves functionality for the entire building. So we have like an entrance that can also serve the mudroom, but it also improves egress from the building.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any other questions? Okay. let's go ahead and close the hearing. Commissioner Wilder, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Chu, would you second that?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed. Commissioner Jefferson, would you like to start this discussion?
It's a restoration project. It's well done. There's some, how accurate 100%, I don't know, but I think it's appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
I think I can accept that it's appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Mahan?
Appropriate.
Commissioner Ginsburg?
Appropriate.
And Commissioner Wilder?
Appropriate.
Commissioner Chu?
Appropriate.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson, would you like to read the motion?
In the matter of LPC 26 07990 15 West 74th Street. Applications to modify masonry openings and replace doors and windows at the front facade. I note that the building scale, style, material, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historical character of the Upper West Side. Central Park Historic Districts. I also note that the stoop was removed prior to the designation of the historic district. I recommend approval, finding that the existing main entrance door opening at the front facade is an altered condition due to the stoop removal. Therefore, the proposed work will not impact any significant architectural features, that the proposed enlarged door opening will align with the parlor floor window opening directly above, that the proposed paired main entrance doors at the ground floor will recall the design, material, and detail of the historic parlor floor doors, that combining the cellar and the first floor window openings by removing a simple stone sill between them at the easternmost bay into a new door opening will provide a code-compliant secondary means of egress, that the historic window grills will be salvaged and installed at the proposed door along with the metal panel that will align with the historic stone sill, therefore recalling the historic window design, that the proposed work will be partially screened by the areaway fencing and within the sunken areaway. Therefore, the alteration will have a discrete presence in the streetscape, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural or historical character of the building or the historic district.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. And John, will you call the vote?
Vice Chair Master,
Aye.
Commissioner Chu,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson, Commissioner Mahan,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder.
Aye.
7 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
That's been approved. Thank you. Now I think what we're going to do is break for lunch. So that concludes our morning session. It is 12:05 now. So let's break until 12:40 and resume the afternoon session. We're going to ask all members of the public on Zoom to voluntarily exit at this time so you don't experience technical difficulties returning to the afternoon session, which can arise if we remove you from the meeting. Thank you.